Hi, and welcome everyone to my session, which is Change Requires Management, and it's all about how you can apply change management techniques to your Dynamics 365 project to improve your chances of a successful project and having lots of people adopt your new system. So, just a quick word on our sponsors. Thanks very much to them for supporting this event. We have DQ Global there. They do some great data quality tools for Dynamics, and some partners, Redspire and Hitachi Solutions, and then Agilysys and ScriptRunner. So a little bit about me. My name's Andrew Bibby, and I actually work for one of those sponsors, Proximo 3. I'm the Customer Success Director. And I've been working on Dynamics 365 projects for the best part of 15 years now. And then in the past kind of 5 years, I've been getting much more interested in change management and how you can apply that to Dynamics 365 projects. Really as a result of working on many projects over those years and seeing some of them not be successfully adopted, and I couldn't really work out why. I figured that I'd done a really good job on those projects and actually there were successful implementations, but then coming back to the project maybe after a year or two and working with the customers again, some of those systems were not well adopted, and I could never really work out why until I started looking at customer success and change management. And really that's all about how people adopt your new system and understanding that. So that's what we're going to talk about today. There's my contact details there. I'd be very happy to follow up and talk with anybody about this topic. I'm really passionate about it. I'm actually a certified change practitioner through an organisation called Prosci, which is a change management organisation. And I'm a Microsoft MVP for business applications as well. So if you want to connect on LinkedIn, click on the link there, or take a copy of the QR code, and I'm very happy to connect too. So let's talk about what change is actually in this context, because change and how it relates to Dynamics 365 projects, you maybe have not made the connection there. So basically what you're trying to do when you implement a new Dynamics 365 system is make change to an organization. And that's not just about the system, but it's probably going to change how people do their jobs as well. Because, over time, the reason for you implementing a new system is to support some business transformation that you're trying to do within your organization. And over time, your organization has changed, and maybe the systems have not kept up, or the processes have not kept up. And so you're implementing your new system, which is your change, in order to effect some business transformation there. So that's what we're talking about in this session. That's what we're talking about when we refer to change. Your change, I'm going to use that interchangeably with your project. So your project or your system, they're all about a change you're trying to implement. So what is change management? Well, obviously it's managing the change that you're trying to put in there, but it's also a discipline, and it's popular around the world. It's akin to project management and how project management was, say, 10, 15, 20 years ago, when not all projects did project management very well. And now all projects have obviously got project managers. It's just a standard. Change management is probably 10 or 15 years behind that curve, but it's really the understanding that actually you need to manage the change that you're putting in, but also the people that are affected by that change. And change management is giving you techniques to allow you to do that. So when you're putting in your new system on your project plan, you've probably got somewhere actually you need to do some training and organize that and let people understand how to use the new system. And also you probably do some comms as well, some emails, and maybe some videos and things like that about the new system to tell people it's coming. And that's all you need to do, right? Well, no, it's more than that, and we'll cover that during this session. If you're just doing training and communications, that's at the very lower end of change management in terms of the spectrum of what you need to do. People may know about your system and what's gonna happen and when it's gonna happen. They may have had some training and kind of understand how to use the new system, but really very often those things are not done very well, and people are either not ready to use your new system, or they don't know about it, or they don't understand why they should be using it. And that's when you get that poor user adoption, and that's what we're trying to address here, really. So in terms of how you would do change management, there are several popular methodologies out there. So a methodology being a list of things that you should do in the order in which you should do them, backed up by research and documentation, basically. And popular ones that are around are Kotter, which you may have heard of, AIM or AIM, McKinsey, and then also Prosci. And I'm going to focus on Prosci here. So Prosci is actually an amalgamation of two words, professional sciences, Prosci. So they're an organisation that was started in the 80s, and they basically started out doing research like Gartner and talking to organisations about how they implemented change, not just new systems, but change overall. And through that research, they actually came out with a set of best practices and a lot of documentation that they now train people on through their training courses, and provide a lot of this research for you. So you have the science, if you like, that's backing up these best practices. And Prosci is actually used by the Microsoft customer success team. It's part of the toolkit that they use, and I think it's very straightforward and common sense and easy to apply on Dynamics 365 projects. So that's why I've focused on it. I'm really a big fan of Prosci. Makes a lot of sense to me. But I would say that actually change management is a big topic. I'm not going to be able to cover anything but the basics and some highlights here in this session today. It's a huge topic. Get some training, and I really recommend Prosci training and AIM as well. Any of these training providers on these methodologies, you're going to get a lot of value out of those. So briefly, what do I know about change management? Well, like I say, I've worked on Dynamics projects for a long time, and often, which is very common in the industry, often those projects, they go live, and you as an implementer or as part of a project team, you then stop working on that project and you leave people to it. But you might come back to that project later and you've got problems with user adoption. You don't really know why. And like I say, I really wanted to understand that. And that's why I started getting into change management about 5 years ago, talking to the customer success team at Microsoft and doing the training as well. So I have a lot of experience with Dynamics, and I have a lot of experience of the problems on Dynamics 365 projects. And then with that slant of understanding the change management side, the ability to sort of apply those techniques to your projects, which is what I'm here talking about. But that's my background, and I'm really passionate about it. I really, really believe that if you're not applying change management to your projects, you stand much less chance of having a successfully adopted system. Okay, so why change management? I'm really going to sell you on it here, I hope. But fundamentally, it's because what I call is hope is not a strategy. Fundamentally, hoping people will use your new system is not going to convince people to use your new system. So, will people use the new system? Well, we hope so. Is what you might hear from somebody on a project. Or we might expect people to use their new system, because it's their job. It's part of their job now. We're changing their processes, we're giving them a new system, we expect them to use it. That might work or it may not. And then finally, we're assuming people are going to use the new system because actually we asked them what they wanted and we built what they wanted. So obviously they would use it, right? Not necessarily. If you've misunderstood requirements, or requirements have moved on, or you didn't speak to the right people, all of these things are going to feed into a system that is not well adopted because it's not quite right. It's not quite what people needed, or they don't understand the reason why they should use it. So, change management is about people, and it's about addressing those individuals who are impacted by your new system and working out why they might be supportive of it or not supportive of using the new system. And this is the point here, is that you're either in a project at the moment, or you've been through a project process where you've built your new Dynamics 365 system, But that really was a technology project. It was configuring Dynamics 365 to do what you wanted, training people, testing it, everything else. But it didn't look at actually how people are impacted by your new system. And that's what change management does. It's all about addressing problems that people might have with your new system. And really, an ideal approach is very, very granular. You would need to speak to every single person who's going to be using your new project, your new system, and tailor make an approach for them to help them through the change that they are going to experience as a result. So they might have changed processes, they might be new to using this system, they might have to enter data that they didn't previously, etc. You know, you're making change for a reason, to make your organization better at what it does, and that changes people's jobs essentially, and you have to ideally address each person in turn. That's not always possible, particularly when you've got hundreds or thousands of users, so you need to take maybe a slightly more high level approach to looking at each group of users in turn and trying to address their issues with using the new system. And this can be done during your project or after your project, you know, particularly if you're suffering with user adoption problems. Is really just talk to people about why they don't want to use the new system and understand, and then react to it. Critical point here is that unless every person using your new system is communicated to about what change you're trying to bring in a way that they understand and have received, your new system won't be well adopted. So they need to have received the communication, and that might be in multiple different ways. You know, how many times have you sent an email and then the person didn't read it? You might need to do videos, you might need to do face-to-face meetings, you might need to get managers in, you might need to get peers in and champions in, you know, to talk to the user groups. But basically getting your change across and what it is and why a person should be making a change needs to be done in an effective way, and that takes quite a long time. So, back to the question of why change management. Fundamentally, research proves that it works. And this is backed by, in this case, Prosci, who spent over 20 years talking to organisations and understanding when they're making changes and what works. And that's why they came up with these best practices and this methodology, because it works. It's research-based, it's science. There is no kind of opinion involved, really. It's not my opinion that this works, or anybody else's individual opinion that this approach works, or change management works. It's backed by thousands of companies that Prosci have talked to, not just Prosci, but, you know, McKinsey, Cotter, these other organisations as well, that have come to these same conclusions. It's proven, basically, and that's why I really like Prosci, because there's science behind it. Fundamental point, again, is that doing some change management, some of these things that I'm going to talk about, is better than doing nothing. Doing some comms and training, you know, is obviously going to be better than doing nothing. But you know, if you can do some of these other things as well, particularly around getting people within your organisation to evangelise about your project, is very, very important. The point here is that, and this is actually something that came up from my teacher on the Prosci training courses, don't let perfect get in the way of good. And what I mean by that is you're probably going to have limited resources to do this change management. There might be 1 or 2, 3 people. So focusing too much on one particular area, like comms, may be at the detriment of other areas as well, or training. You know, so if you can apply those resources in a logical way across your project, that will be better than focusing on one particular area. So it's don't let perfect get in the way of good, and that means, you know, don't put too much emphasis on one particular area if you can spread your people across the change management. And then another point, and this really I think applies to Dynamics 365 projects in general, in particular with CRM systems, but other systems as well, is that your organisation never stops changing. Particularly in recent times, they've had to go through a lot of change in a short period of time. And so the management of that change never stops, not just in the systems, but the general organization. You have to be applying change management continually. It's a journey. It's not a one-off, you do something for 6 months and then everybody walks away, which is very commonly the way people think on Dynamics projects, and not just Dynamics software projects in general. You build something, you test it, you train it out, you deliver it, and then it's all good. We all go home, right? Well, no, it's because the change continues and you need to continually change your system to adapt to that and also manage the change as well. So it's a journey. One chart for you, and this is again from Prosci, but I think it's really important to understand. This is based on research. This is about a dozen years of research have gone into these stats, but I want to unpack this chart a little bit. And what we're looking at here is the number of participants in their surveys that met or exceeded their objectives when they were trying to implement a change. So met or exceeded. And for Dynamics 365, that really equates to, has it been a successful project or has it been a failure of a project? Is it built, we've spent thousands of pounds or dollars on this new system, and is anybody using it? And it's very common on CRM projects for the answer to be no in that case. For whatever reason, I think maybe because it's related to how much change is needed within an organization to implement CRM systems, they're not well adopted generally. And that's been my experience overall. That's borne out in research. But the reasons, you can directly link those reasons to the change management effectiveness here. So if we're looking at the chart here, on the left-hand side, we've got only 15% of organizations met or exceeded objectives. Only 15%. That means 85% failed to meet their objectives. That's 8 out of 10, more than 8 out of 10. And that's when they were doing poor change management. Going up the chart, you can see here, if you're doing some good change management, actually it's flipped around almost completely. Nearly 80% of those projects met or exceeded objectives, and then all the way up to 93%. Almost every project, 9 out of 10 projects or changes that are being implemented were meeting or exceeding those objectives. And that's exactly what you want, right? You want to hit your objectives because that's when you get your return on investment. You're spending a lot of money on these projects and you have to earn that money back through efficiencies or increased sales or whatever it is. So it's obvious to me, looking at this chart, unless you're doing change management well, you are much, much less likely to be successful and get that money back. And so that's what the 6x is there. You're 6 times more likely to be successful if you're doing good change management, excellent change management. It's just a no-brainer to do this stuff on your projects, right? So one of the other tips that's borne out from research is it's much better to use a change management methodology rather than just trying to kind of make it up on your own, come up with a communications plan or a training plan. You can use a methodology that's well established from best practices. In this case, I'll talk about Prosci, but it's already there for you, and stuff that works backed by this research. So why wouldn't you use a methodology? You're more likely to be successful with one. So let's look at the Prosci methodology, which is called ADKAR. So you can see that mnemonic is for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. And they're different stages of the change management life cycle. And you can see this is in a nice circle of arrows because, back to that point of change never stops. You need to continually do this stuff, not just through your project, but onwards. As you are implementing change within your organization. So let's dig into those a little bit more closely. First things first, you need to make people aware of the change. So each of these areas are really targeted at the people receiving the change. So they need to be aware of the need to change. They probably hate their existing systems, and so that's a need for change. And they also need to be aware of the nature of the change that you're bringing. What's your new project going to do for them, and how? That starts to build some desire. So if they can see that there is benefit to using the new system, they're going to start to support that and also participate in your process as well, because you want to be finding out what their pain points are, what their problems are, so that you can address them with this new system. And that builds desire. Knowledge then is something that you need to give them. Basically, how can they adapt to this new system? What processes might they need to change? How does their daily job change as a result of your project that you're putting in, or that you have already put in if you're already live? And that requires a bit of effort over and above training somebody just on how to use a new system. It's much wider than that. What is the overall impact on their job? Ability, and that really is when we're talking about training. So they need the ability to use the new system, but also use these new processes they're being expected to adapt to. And crucially, they should be tested on their level of ability. It's no good putting people through training, hoping that they've understood everything and then letting them loose on the system. You do need to test them and find out how effective that training has been. If it's not effective enough, train more. Otherwise, your results are going to be the same. If you're not, it's doing the same thing, expecting a different outcome. You have to make sure that the training is working, and that's something that I see very rarely done on projects. People get trained and then they're left to their own devices, rather than, particularly in this day and age where you've got a lot of remote training going on, you're not really testing people about how much is sinking in. And then finally, you've got the reinforcement stage. So this is where, after you've gone live, you really need to keep that reinforcement of understanding that people still know how to use the system. Maybe they use it infrequently, or they're a new starter. So you need to do a bit more training there, and also these new processes or changes to processes as well. So it's a continual reinforcement. This is not something that stops, and that's a key point to get across. And that helps build a culture of change and acceptance of change. You might have people in your organization that have been doing the same job for years and years and years, and they're very resistant to change how they do that. And what you want to do is, over time, flip them into being accepting of change. Getting across the point that change is happening within the organization. You can't stop that, and so you have to kind of get on board. So that's ADKAR, and I really recommend, if you're interested, dig into this a bit more. There's lots of information out there on how to implement the ADKAR process, and I'll mention one of those later. Okay, so how does that look on a typical Dynamics project? So we're going to look at a simplified example here of a project that is fairly waterfall. Now, obviously, not all projects work like this anymore, but the same principles apply, really. So we've got a requirements phase, and we talk to people about what they want. We're going to do some design to work out what configuration and development we need to do. And then we do the development work, and we do the testing. And hopefully everything's working great. And then we train users on it near a go live. So that's pretty typical, right? Hopefully you recognize that. So how do we apply change management to that? Well, my point here is that change management applies across this process entirely. It starts before your project implementation kicks off, where you're building that awareness and that desire, and it continues all the way through as you're getting communications out there, you're training people, you're building that ability and knowledge, and it continues after the project has gone live. Now, this is an important point which I'll come to. So that awareness and desire, you're starting to build that before the project starts. Maybe you're talking to senior stakeholders who are impacted by your project. You're talking to people on the ground about their requirements and the design, and you're getting them involved in that design. So that's building that awareness and desire of the ADKAR phase. Knowledge also starts building within design, where you've got SMEs maybe from your organization, and you're involving them in the design process. They're looking at the new system during development, so you're keeping them engaged, and they're probably going to be involved in testing as well, so things like user acceptance testing. And again, with UAT starts to build that ability. Can they use the new system? Do they understand what processes they need to change? And that continues through the training phase. And then crucially, this reinforcement part really starts during training, where you're mopping up and understanding that people have been trained properly and they really understand what they're doing. And it continues after go live, and I very rarely see this done. You need to have people available to continue with the training, not just on the system, but the processes, the impact on the individuals, and that continues. And you continue to make change to your new system as the organisation changes, and so this whole change process has to continue as well. Now, a fundamental point to get across here is that this is an additional layer here. This is going to add people to your project and therefore cost to your project. However, if you're not doing this, going back to that research, you are very, very much less likely to be successful with your project and therefore see that return on investment through good user adoption. If you're not doing this ADCAR process in this case, but it requires money. You can't get away from that, and that is something to get out very clearly and early within your project lifecycle. Okay, so let's look at two things I think are fundamental to look at on your project. So if you're in the project now, or if you're after your project has gone live and you've got problems, look at these two things and that will help you. First thing is you need to have people who evangelize your new system within the organization, and that can be done through what's called sponsorship. I'll come on to that in a minute. And secondly, you're looking at how you deal with that resistance to change, and that might be before you've put your new system in or afterwards, and it's more likely to be afterwards where it really hits people in the face. Actually, I don't really like this new system, and you need to be talking to them about that. It's no good hoping people will suddenly change their mind. It's much more likely they'll actually go back to doing things the old way, or they'll create a spreadsheet. I've seen that so many times. So let's look at those. Sponsorship first of all. Now, throughout the research that Prosci have done over 20 odd years, the number one reason or contributor to successfully implementing a change is sponsorship. Every single year they've done this research. That's also backed up by research from other organisations like McKinsey and Gartner. And lots of other organisations that have looked at this, but active and visible sponsorship is key. So what is sponsorship? It's basically having key stakeholders in your organisation be champions for your project and for your change that you're trying to implement. And they need to be on board and communicative. So that's a sponsor, and identifying those key people is very important. Where do you start with this? First things first, or the most important thing to do is identify a primary sponsor, and they should be a very senior person within their organisation who is listened to who's going to really bang the drum for your project, because that change, that influence percolates down through an organisation. If it starts at the top, and that top person is influencing their people, and then they influence their people, that percolates down through the organisation. So you need a very senior person on board. So find your right project sponsor, primary sponsor, and then we're going to look at a project sponsorship model, and we'll dig into that in a bit more detail. So what makes a good sponsor? All sponsors in this case should have good communication skills. That's kind of key, right? They should be able to communicate why this is a good thing, what we're doing here is a good thing. They need to be credible within their peer group, a recognised leader, so that they're listened to when they're communicating. Be approachable, and very importantly, be available. Now, your senior people within your organisation, that may be one of the hardest things to get, is actually get people who have the time to be good sponsors. And the point to get across here is that actually they need to make the time. They need to offload some of those other responsibilities so they do have the time to be available for this. They need to be visible on your project, and that's very important too. Supportive, obviously, and also involved, understand what you're doing on a really, fairly good level of detail, so they can have those conversations with different people within the organisation outside of your project. Being visible is very, very important, because that's on your project and also outside of your project. There's no good appointing somebody who's a good primary sponsor, for example, or any sponsor, and then they disappear and they pop up every few months to give another communication. It's just not effective. And then finally, they should be able to show their passion and the enthusiasm for the change that you're implementing. And this comes back to understanding what your project is about and the benefits it brings. And they should be able to communicate that passionately. That's much more effective. The primary sponsor is the key one here. They need to be very senior and also visible. And that's back to that active and visible sponsorship. Ideally, they would be right at the top of your organisation, because then people will listen to them, basically, and they need to have that credibility within their peer group. So very, very important to identify a primary sponsor, and very difficult. And actually, I've worked on very few projects where the primary sponsor is the right person at the right level. It is difficult to get those people, but aim as high as you can. Remember, don't let perfect get in the way of good. So how do you develop a sponsorship model? Let's look at an example. What we're going to do is identify a primary sponsor, first of all, and then identify sponsors in those business areas that are affected by the change. And then we're going to do a sponsorship assessment, a sponsor assessment, to look at each of our sponsors. They may be not supportive of our change right now, so that's why you want to find out what their opinions are. And by building out this sponsorship model, it's crucial, because back to the point of the sponsorship and support flowing down the organisation, if you don't have this support and this sponsorship, you're very much less likely to have really engaged people within your organisation who know about what you're doing and are accepting of it. Sometimes they need to be influenced by more senior people. That's why this is very, very important, and it's the number one thing you can do on your project to make it more successful. Once you've got your sponsors and they understand what they need to do and they understand they have the time to do it, put them to work. Be those evangelists, talking to their peers, talking to the people that they are above, and influencing them, basically. So they need to work at this and they need to understand. Sponsorship's quite a big area, so I'd recommend doing some training on change management and focusing on this area of sponsorship. There's quite a lot to it, understanding the psychology. Okay, so let's go through a fairly straightforward assessment here. I want to just talk you through how you would do it practically. So identify the business areas in your organisation, identify your sponsors, and as an example here, I'm talking about an organisation that's got a customer service, a sales, a logistics, and a marketing departments. Now, that might not be your organisation, but you kind of get the idea. Look at the impacted areas of your business. Then what you need to do, identify your primary sponsor, somebody very senior, and then for each of those business areas, several sponsors you can approach. And the example here, I've just got the initials of each person in those areas that we want to approach. And now this is where you're going to get out your piece of paper and pen, or do it on Visio or whatever. But you do need to go through this assessment between the people on the project, and also involving your primary sponsor, because they may be able to nominate other sponsors or influence other sponsors, so they're key. And what you want to do then is actually classify each of your sponsors as a supporter of your project, your change. They're neutral to it currently, or they're a detractor currently. And that may be after some conversation you've had with them. And let's be honest and open. If anybody's telling porcupines, telling fibs about their understanding, or whether they're neutral or detractor to your project, then that's not going to help you. So you need to get some honest assessment done here. Okay, then we're going to look at, are these sponsors, do they have the right criteria? Do they meet the right criteria to be a good sponsor for your project? And they may do, or they may not do currently. And that's back to that list I talked about earlier. So are they credible? Are they recognized as a leader in their peer group? Do they communicate well? Do they have the time to do this? And that's, the good sponsors will hit those criteria. Moderate, maybe they hit some of them. Low, they may not be the right person, or they may be the right person that you need to work with to get them up to being a good sponsor. So you classify people in that way, 1, 2, or 3. And then once you've done all this and you've done this assessment, you then can literally colour in your diagram. It sounds a bit, basic, but it really does immediately highlight areas that you need to work on. So the only people that can be green are A1s. That means they are already a supporter of your project or your change, and they have a good sponsor ability. So they're green, they're good to go. Anybody who is an A2, you can colour yellow. They need a bit of help. So they're a supporter, but they don't have quite yet that good ability to be a sponsor. So they need some help, maybe some coaching, maybe some freeing up of their time, for example, to get them up to that green level, that A1. Everybody else is red. So anybody else is red, and they're the areas you need to focus on, because they're either neutral or negative towards your change, or they may not be a good sponsor currently. So they're the people you need to work on. So I really like this because it very quickly makes it obvious where you need to put your effort in when you're putting this sponsorship model together. And then this coalition of people is going to be the evangelism team for your organization. Now you imagine over time, and if you do this assessment again throughout your project, you want to be turning those reds to yellows, those yellows to greens, right? If you imagine by the time you're going live, if you have lots of greens there, that means that you've got a really engaged sponsorship coalition who are really communicating well out to the organization. And everybody stands a much better chance of being on board then, not just the sponsors, but actually the people receiving your new system. So it's very, very important to get this sponsorship model in. Okay, so the next area to look at is actually how you deal with resistance to the change that you're putting in. And this may be after you've already gone live, or actually earlier in the project when you're talking to people about what they want from a new system. But importantly, let's look at some areas to focus on. Just listen to people. That's a really basic thing that you can do, is just listen to the objections that people have. If they've got a new system already and they're not using it, really try to understand why. Because unless you understand why, you can't fix anything. You can't fix a problem that you don't know exists. And sometimes people just want to get out. And that helps, that's cathartic, that starts to get them on board, it starts the ball rolling about what their problems are. It's a really easy way, once you've listened to them, to identify where they might be misunderstanding something, either about how their system works, or what your intentions are, or whatever it might be. It provides that path then to getting a resolution to their issues, and that starts to get them on board. So if you can fix what the problems are, or as many as you can, that starts to get to wear down that resistance to your change. So really, really important to do that. The other thing you can do is show the benefits of your new solution. It may revolutionize somebody's job. They may be worried actually about, they might be losing their job, or they might be changing their job that they've done for years. So you really need to answer the question on an individual basis. What's in it for me, for each type of user, not at a general level. Each type of user, what's in it for me? Why is my life going to be better as a result of this? As part of that, show the system as you're building it, and that really helps to get people on board. They can start to imagine and have a picture in their head of how their job's going to be once you go live. Highlighting efficiencies particularly, if it's going to make somebody's life easier or make that boring mundane task that they do quicker, what's not to like. And then inviting early adopters and champions to demonstrate, crucially, do the demonstration themselves to their peers. So it's not the project, it's not IT forcing people to use a new product or a new system. Actually get their peers involved and have them do the demonstrations, and they can be your evangelists on the ground. And then share successes that you've had in other areas of the business. So if you're rolling this out to a new area, a new office, a new country, really demonstrate very visibly actually what was successful in those areas that have already had it, and that helps get people on board. So you're dealing with those again, that resistance. You're trying to convince people actually this is a good thing. Another thing that you can do, and I actually think this is really important, is incentivize people. What I'm talking about here is this thing of spend money to make money. Build into your project budget money to support incentives to get people to use your new system. What do I mean by that? Incentivize every single user in some way. Not just the people in sales, not just the people, management, whatever. Every single user. And that may be in different ways. It may be straightforward, increase compensation, build it into their targets. Particularly with salespeople, that's very common. Use the new CRM system, and we'll put that into your target for the year, and that will help you earn more money. It might be different ways. Company benefits. It might be, gym membership, or career advice, or training, or something else they're interested in. But company benefits that they will cost money, but they provide that incentive for people to use the new system. Give them early access to new features. This is a way to getting those really engaged people on board, or keeping them on board. Those champions, give them access to the new stuff before anybody else, and then you're starting to build that kind of, I feel a bit special, but also get them to evangelize the changes that are about to come for the rest of the people. And then peer recognition. So that's something that a lot of people respond well to, is actually recognizing people that are using the new system in the right way. They're using it well. And you need to measure this, obviously. So that's something you need to build into your new solution, the ability to measure if people are using it properly. And then incentivize them. Now that has a flip side, of course. The people that don't use the new system don't get the benefits. So that's the negative. That's the kind of carrot and stick, if you like. Carrot, you get some of these nice new things, these incentives. Stick, well, if you're not using it, you're not going to get those new things or those benefits. So you've got to incentivize people. I think that's very important. And if you're thinking about, actually, God, this is going to cost a lot of money, think about how much money you're spending on your project. It's likely to be hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds or dollars on your new project. If you took a percentage of that to provide these incentives, and off the back of that you get a much better adopted system, then you're getting that money back. You're earning new money for your organization, maybe through new sales or better customer service, and you're making back that return on investment that you originally thought you would do, and you're having a successful project. So really think about adding a bit of money in the budget to incentivize people properly. And that's something I very rarely see done, but it's very, very effective, again, based on that research. Okay, so we're coming to the end. Would you like to know more? I think it's kind of, obvious that this is a big topic, right? And I've not been able to cover everything that you would need to know about change management. So things that you can do next, I really recommend actually that you get some training, whether it's Prosci or AIM, these are the change management methodologies. They're all good, right? And they're all very popular. So get some training. Prosci do a really, really good 3-day course to get certified. They also do a 1-day course, which is aimed at leadership, so they can understand the importance of change management. If you can't do that for whatever reason, or you don't have the time, there's a book that Prosci do about ADKAR that goes into a lot more detail than I can cover today. The link there is the link to the Amazon page for that book. It's a very good read. I recommend that. And then finally, talk to your partner, your implementation partner, who is helping you with the Dynamics implementation, about change management and customer success. They should hopefully have services available to you that can help you with some of this stuff. Help you with all the communications plan, training plan, sponsorship model, dealing with resistance, all those things. They should hopefully have resources available to you for that. So to wrap up, I am Customer Success Director, obviously. This is really my passion. And if you would like to talk about any of this, drop me a line. There's my contact details. Happy to have a chat about what's possible on your project, or maybe a more formal engagement. So that's my contact details there. And I just want to thank you for attending. I really, like I say, I'm passionate about this topic. I'm passionate about applying it to Dynamics projects in particular, because that's my background, and I really want them to be successful and to have a better reputation than they currently do. And the only way to do that, in my mind, is, yes, do great project management, have successful implementations, but also you have to do this change management side as well to be successful. But thanks very much. The session will be recorded and is going to be posted on YouTube about 2 weeks after the event. So if you weren't able to catch it, you can see it on YouTube there. I just want to wish you a very good rest of the day. I hope you're getting lots of knowledge and value from Scottish Summit. Thank you to the organisers, Mark and Ian, and I'll see you again soon.